It starts with a bag. A red North Face holdall, zipped shut and padlocked. The kind you might take to the gym. But this bag wasn't at a gym. It was in the bathtub of a top-floor flat in Pimlico, London. And inside the bag was the body of a man. His name was Gareth Williams. This was August 2010, the height of summer. Williams hadn't shown up for work for a few days. His colleagues at MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service, got worried. They sent someone to check on him. When no one answered the door, police were called. They broke in and found the flat empty. It was tidy, almost unnervingly so. Then they checked the bathroom, and they found the bag. The discovery was bizarre, but the details were even stranger. The flat was locked from the inside. There was no sign of a struggle. No forced entry. The heating had been left on high, which sped up decomposition and made it harder to determine the exact time and cause of death. And the keys to the padlock that sealed the bag were inside the bag with Gareth's body. Instantly, a question formed. A question that, more than a decade later, still has no definitive answer. Did Gareth Williams somehow lock himself inside that bag in a tragic accident? Or was he murdered by forces unknown, placed in the bag by a professional killer who vanished without a trace? Accident or a spy hit? The truth lies somewhere in the space between those two possibilities. To understand the theories, you have to understand the man. Gareth Williams was not an ordinary person. He was, by all accounts, a genius. A mathematical prodigy from Anglesey in Wales. He got his first-class degree in maths at 17. He went on to get a PhD. His brain worked on a different level. This led him to GHQ, the UK's Signals Intelligence Agency. He was a codebreaker, the kind of person who sees patterns nobody else can. After several years at GCHQ, he was seconded to MI6 in London. This is a big deal. GHQ deals with data, with listening. MI6 deals with people, with human intelligence. It's the world of James Bond, but without the glamour. It's dangerous, secretive work. John Williams was reportedly a private, quiet man. He was incredibly fit, a keen cyclist. He was also, it would later be revealed, interested in fashion and women's clothing. He had a collection of expensive, high-end dresses and shoes in his flat, worth around £20,000. This is where the two stories begin to diverge. The two paths the investigation could take. One path leads into his private life, the other leads into his secret one. Let's look at the accident theory first. This is the version the London Metropolitan Police eventually settled on. They believed his death was most likely an accident. The theory goes something like this. Gareth Williams was involved in some form of private solo activity. Perhaps it was related to escapology. Perhaps it was a form of claustrophilia, the love of being in enclosed spaces, possibly for erotic reasons. The evidence for this centers on his personal life. Investigators found he had visited websites related to bondage and sadomasochism. The women's clothing in his apartment could be seen as part of a private fetishistic world. In this scenario, Williams, for reasons only he knew, decided to climb into the bag. He pulled the zip closed from the inside. He then somehow reached through the small gap he'd left, maneuvered the padlock into place on the zip toggles, and snapped it shut. The idea was that he intended to get out, but something went wrong. Maybe he hyperventilated and passed out from a buildup of carbon dioxide. Or maybe he had a sudden medical issue, a heart arrhythmia. Stuck in the bag, unable to escape, he suffocated. It was a private act that ended in tragedy. This theory explains a few things. It explains why there was no forced entry. It explains why the door was locked from the inside. And it explains the lack of any unidentified DNA at the scene. If he was alone, there would be no one else's DNA. It paints a picture of a lonely, secretive man whose private pursuits led to his death. But there are huge problems with this theory, massive, almost insurmountable problem. The biggest one is the physical act of locking the bag from the inside. Police tried to replicate it. They hired 2 experienced escapologists. These were men who trained their whole lives to be flexible, to get out of tight spots. They tried over 400 times to get into a similar bag, zip it up, and padlock it from the inside. They failed every single time. One of them, a man named Peter Falding, was adamant. It was impossible. He said that even if you could somehow get the padlock on, the contortions required would be so extreme that you couldn't do it without leaving some trace of your DNA or fingerprints on the rim of the bathtub, the padlock, or the zip. But the scene was clean. Gareth Williams' fingerprints weren't on the padlock. His DNA wasn't on the lock. No one's was. The outside of the zip had a partial print from him and a partial print from someone else, but it was too degraded to identify. It was as if the scene had been wiped down. A neat freak codebreaker might be tidy, but would he wipe his prints in the middle of an escapology stunt? It seems unlikely. Another expert, a yoga master, known for his flexibility, did manage to get into the bag and pull the zip almost fully closed, but he couldn't lock it, and he needed assistance to get out. He also noted that doing it in the cramped space of a bathtub would be even harder. For Gareth Williams was a fit man, but he wasn't a contortionist. The idea that he could perform a feat that stumped professional escapologists stretches belief to its breaking point. And then there's the issue of the heating. Why was it on full blast in August? If it was an accident, it was just a strange coincidence. But a coincidence that happened to destroy forensic evidence. And what about the lack of any signs of distress? No scratches on the inside of the bag, no signs of a frantic attempt to escape. Of course, if he passed out quickly from carbon dioxide, that might explain it. But it's another piece that doesn't quite fit. The whole accident theory rests on a foundation of extreme improbability. It requires us to believe that Gareth Williams, a meticulous planner and brilliant mind, attempted an almost physically impossible act for reasons unknown, failed, and died, all while leaving a scene so forensically clean it looked like it was staged. This is where the second theory comes in. The spy hit. This theory suggests that Gareth Williams was murdered because of his work, and that his killers were professionals who knew how to cover their tracks. They were what people in the intelligence world call the dark arts. The motive is the first question. What was Williams working on? We'll never know for sure. His work was top secret. But there were hints. He had just returned from a trip to the United States where he was believed to be working with the NSA. Some reports suggested he was involved in tracing international money laundering routes, possibly involving Russian organized crime syndicates or even state actors. This is dangerous work. People who get in the way of massive flows of illegal money have a habit of disappearing. Another possibility is that he stumbled upon something he shouldn't have, a secret within the intelligence services themselves. Perhaps a mole or an illegal operation. Some friends and family said he had been unhappy with his work at MI6 and was planning to return to GHQ in Cheltenham. He had apparently complained about the rat race and friction in the office culture. Was he about to leave, and did he know something that made him a liability? In this scenario, his death looks very different. The killers, perhaps one or two people, gained access to his flat. Maybe they knew him. Maybe they tricked him. Maybe they simply picked the lock with expert skill, leaving no trace. There was no struggle because they were professionals. They subdued him quickly and quietly. How did they kill him? The cause of death was never definitively established because of the body's decomposition. But experts have suggested methods that leave no trace. A specific poison that mimics a heart attack. A specialized form of suffocation. Something that would incapacitate him without leaving bruises or marks. Then, the staging. They placed his body in the bag. Why? Maybe it was a message. A display of professional dominance, or maybe it was purely practical. A way to contain the body and slow down discovery. They turned up the heat to accelerate decomposition and destroy evidence. They wiped the scene clean of any fingerprints or DNA. They locked the bag from the outside, taking the keys with them. No, wait, that's the problem. The keys were inside. So how does the spy hit theory explain the keys? This is the most difficult part. One idea is that it was a deliberate act of misdirection, a way to make the death look like a bizarre accident, to send investigators down the wrong path, chasing theories about escapology and sexual misadventure. A professional killer might be clever enough to find a way to lock the padlock from the outside and then somehow maneuver the keys back inside through a tiny gap in the zip before pulling it fully taut. It sounds tricky, but perhaps not impossible for someone with the right skills and tools. It would be the ultimate act of clean skin work, creating a mystery so deep that no one can ever solve it. There's more evidence to support the idea of a third party being involved. The delay in finding his body is a major red flag. Williams was a creature of habit. His job at MI6 was sensitive. When an officer on a secret operation doesn't show up for work for one day, alarm bells should be ringing. But he was missing for a week before anyone physically checked his flat. Why the delay? His family has always found this deeply suspicious. It felt like his employers, the very people tasked with protecting him, were slow to react. Was this simple incompetence, or was something else going on behind the scenes? Did someone in the service want him to be found late? Then there were the strange sightings. A Mediterranean-looking couple was reportedly seen visiting his building late at night in the weeks before his death. Who were they? Police were never able to identify them. They may have been innocent visitors, but in a case like this, every loose end looks like a clue. His phone was also a source of mystery. A factory reset had been performed on it in the days after he was last seen alive, but before his body was discovered. Who did that and why? The official investigation was also marked by a strange tension between the police and the intelligence services. MI6 and GHQ held back certain information citing national security. They had secret meetings with the police investigators. What was said in those meetings, what lines of inquiry were encouraged, and which were shut down. The family's lawyer later said that the intelligence agencies had essentially contaminated the crime scene by moving items before the police forensic teams had a chance to fully examine it. They claimed they were looking for sensitive documents, but the action cast a shadow of doubt over the entire process. This brings us to the formal inquest, which is a legal proceeding in the UK to determine the cause of death. The coroner, Dr. Fiona Wilcox, heard all the evidence. She listened to the police, the escapologists, the family, and the little information the intelligence agencies were willing to provide. Her conclusion was starkly different from the police's. In 2012, she delivered her verdict. She said Gareth Williams was unlawfully killed. She dismissed the accident theory. "I am satisfied that on the balance of probabilities," she said, "Gareth was killed unlawfully." She found the idea that he locked himself in the bag highly unlikely. She believed a third party was either present at his death or responsible for placing him in the bag. She pointed to the lack of fingerprints and the sheer physical difficulty of the act as key reasons. She said the real reason for his death would likely never be known because so much evidence had been lost or withheld by the Secret Services. It was a powerful rebuke to the official narrative that was starting to form. But then, something strange happened. A year after the coroner's verdict, the Metropolitan Police announced the conclusion of their own review. They contradicted the coroner. They said they believed his death was more likely to be an accident. They concluded that there was no evidence of any other person being in the apartment, no sign of a break-in, and no clear motive for murder. They essentially closed the case, reverting to the deeply flawed theory that he had somehow done it to himself. This created an official split. A coroner, after a full legal inquest, says it was murder. The police, after their own investigations, say it was probably an accident. How can that be? The police's conclusion felt weak to many. It relied heavily on the absence of evidence. No forced entry, no unidentified DNA. But in the world of espionage, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Professional killers are defined by their ability to leave no evidence. The police seem to be looking for clues from a normal murder, a messy struggle, a jilted lover, a robbery gone wrong. They didn't seem equipped to investigate a death that might have been orchestrated by a state intelligence agency or a sophisticated criminal network. The family of Gareth Williams has never accepted the accident theory. They believe he was murdered and that the state has failed to find his killers. They feel there has been a cover-up, a deliberate effort to steer the investigation away from the uncomfortable truths of his work. They point to the total public interest immunity certificates used by the intelligence agencies to prevent certain witnesses from testifying at the inquest. They believe the full story of Gareth's final days and his secret work has been buried. So where does that leave us? We have two stories, both filled with holes. The accident story requires us to believe in a feat of near-impossible contortionism performed for unknown reasons, which ended in a tidy, forensically clean death scene. It asks us to accept that a man as brilliant and meticulous as Gareth Williams died in a moment of reckless, bizarre misadventure. The spy hit story requires us to believe in the dark arts, in invisible assassins who can kill without a trace and stage a crime scene to look like something else entirely. It asks us to believe in a state-level conspiracy or a professional contract killing, followed by a cover-up where intelligence agencies obstructed a police investigation to protect their secrets. When you weigh them up, the spy hit theory, as outlandish as it sounds, seems to answer more questions than it creates. It explains the impossible act of locking the bag. It explains the forensic cleanliness of the scene. It explains the motive, tying his death to his dangerous work. It explains the strange behavior of the intelligence agencies and the delay in finding him. The only major puzzle it leaves is the precise method of getting the keys back inside the bag. But is that puzzle more difficult to solve than the puzzle of him getting in and locking it himself? Perhaps the most telling detail is the clash between the two official verdicts. A coroner's court, a forum designed specifically to find the truth about a death, concluded it was murder. The police, who perhaps had reasons to avoid a complex and politically sensitive international investigation, concluded it was an accident. For many, the coroner's verdict holds more weight. Dr. Wilcox had no agenda other than to follow the evidence. The death of Gareth Williams remains a modern mystery, a perfect circle of unanswered questions. He was a man who lived a life of secrets, and it seems his death is destined to be his final unsolvable puzzle. The image of his body curled up inside that red holdall, locked in a bathtub, is a haunting one. It's a symbol of a story where the most important details are missing. Was he a victim of his own private world, a man whose fetishes led to a fatal mistake? Or was he a victim of his public work, A spy who knew too much and was eliminated by forces that operate in the shadows. We may never know. The truth could be something else entirely, a third option no one has even considered. But, as it stands, we are left the cold facts of the scene and the two competing narratives they produce. The quiet codebreaker, the women's clothes, the empty flat, the money, the SIM cards, the wiped phone, the missing days. And at the center of it all, a locked bag in a bathtub. A bag that holds the body of Gareth Williams, and a secret that has been locked away with him. The question of whether it was an accident or a spy hit isn't just a question about one man's death. It's a question about which world we believe is more plausible. A world of unbelievable private accidents, or a world of brutally efficient secret services. In the strange case of the body in the bag, both seem equally possible and equally terrifying.